Grandma had saved a tiny kitten from the cold, its little body trembling as she held it close. But as the days went by, something odd started to happen. The kitten's yellow eyes seemed almost too sharp, always watching. It moved with surprising strength, making huge leaps that didn't make sense for its size. And when the truth finally came out, Grandma could hardly believe it. What had she really brought into her home? Marta was just settling in for the evening when an odd sound cut through the stillness of her cozy living room. She froze, her hand hovering over her teacup, ears straining. There it was again, a soft, distressed squeak floating in with the cool autumn air. Her heart picked up a bit. She stood from her armchair, moving quickly despite her age. She draped a warm shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto the porch, eyes scanning the dim, quiet yard. Night had started to fall, making every rustle of leaves and breath of wind seem louder. The squeaking sound came again, clearer this time, like it was calling out for someone to hear it. Concern mixed with curiosity, and Marta grabbed the flashlight from its hook by the door. She headed down the steps, the beam cutting through the dark and casting long, jittery shadows. Moving carefully through her garden, she followed the sound to the big oak tree at the far end of the yard. That's where the light landed on a tiny, shaking ball of fur pressed against the roots. It was a kitten, small, wet, and shivering. Its wide, scared eyes looked up at her, and Marta's heart ached. It was all alone, clearly frightened and cold. Without even thinking, she gently scooped it into her arms. The kitten's damp fur clung to her, its little body trembling as a sharp gust of wind swept past them. She hurried back inside, her mind racing with concern. The poor thing must have been out there for hours. In the warmth of her kitchen, she carefully washed it with warm water, its soft cries filling the quiet space. Wrapping it in a fluffy towel, she dried it slowly and placed it near the fireplace where the heat could help chase away the cold. Marta warmed some milk, and the kitten eagerly drank it down. Slowly, its tiny body relaxed. As she watched it curl up and drift off to sleep, something shifted. The silence in her home felt less heavy now. The kitten's arrival had brought a flicker of life back into her days, and she couldn't help but feel grateful for the unexpected company. The night passed quietly, and Marta stayed close by, keeping an eye on the little one. A quiet sense of purpose crept back into her routine, something she hadn't felt in a while. When the morning sun poured into the room, the kitten stretched and stirred, already more alert and curious. Deciding it was time to revisit where it all began, Marta stepped outside with the kitten nestled in her arm. She walked slowly back to the old oak tree, the spot where their paths had first crossed and where something strange and important had started. The yard, now glowing in morning sunlight, felt completely different from the shadowy place it had been the night before. As they neared the oak tree, Marta noticed something odd, signs in the dirt and scattered leaves. Tiny paw prints and a messy trail led straight to the tree's base, the exact spot where she'd first found the kitten. It was clear the little one had gone through something before ending up at her doorstep. Holding the kitten tighter, Marta felt a sudden wave of protectiveness. She leaned in and whispered, "You've been on quite the little adventure, haven't you?" The kitten let out a small mew, quiet but full of curious energy. Its eyes grew wide, a mix of recognition and unease crossing its face as it looked at the tree. Marta made a silent promise to herself. She would make sure her yard was safe from now on. The idea that this tiny creature had come to her garden for safety touched her deeply. She felt a growing sense of responsibility. No matter what had scared it off before, she wouldn't let it face the world alone again. As they turned to head back inside, the kitten's hesitant steps turned into light skips around her ankles, its tiny paws kicking up leaves with each bounce. With each playful leap, the kitten seemed to be settling in, claiming Marta's home as its own. The fear that had gripped her when she found it was slowly giving way to something else: affection. She hadn't expected to care this quickly, but the little thing had already nestled itself into her heart. This odd little discovery, which started in worry, now felt like the beginning of something sweet. Marta could feel it. Something in her world was shifting. She didn't know exactly what was ahead, but she welcomed it. A sense of purpose was blooming again, and the small creature beside her was the reason. As she stepped back inside and closed the door, she couldn't help but smile. Her quiet, predictable life had just taken an unexpected and much-needed turn. Adjusting to a new home can be tricky, but Oliver, as Marta had started calling him, handled it like a champ. That first night he wandered the rooms with cautious curiosity, peeking into corners, sniffing at rugs, learning the shape of his new world. Marta lay in bed, listening to the soft patter of tiny paws on the wood floor, her heart full, part worry, part love. The next morning, Marta decided it was time to make sure Oliver was healthy. She called Dr. Brown, the local vet, and booked a checkup. As she got ready, she noticed Oliver was less bouncy than usual. He seemed to sense something was up, moving slower, staying close, unsure about what was coming. At the vet's office, Oliver clung to her, wide-eyed and quiet, taking in all the unfamiliar sights and smells. Dr. Brown welcomed them with a kind smile, kneeling to Oliver's level. "Well now, who do we have here?" he said, offering his hand for Oliver to sniff before starting the exam. Marta held her breath as the vet gently looked him over. "He's in surprisingly good shape," Brown said after a moment, "especially considering what he's been through. But he'll need a little extra care for a while." Marta let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Oliver was okay. The relief hit her all at once, leaving her both calm and emotional. They left with a clean bill of health, a bag full of supplies, special food, vitamins, even a small toy to help him settle in. On the ride home, Marta chatted to Oliver about her garden, pointing out where the flowers grew and where birds often landed. It felt like she was welcoming him not just into her house, but into her life. Once home, Oliver's energy returned quickly. Hour by hour, his steps grew bolder. He chased sunbeams across the living room, tumbling after bits of dust in the light. Marta, watching from her armchair, found herself laughing, a sound that hadn't filled the house in quite some time. It was a sound Marta hadn't realized had gone missing from her life until now, her own laughter. That evening, as the day wound down, Oliver curled up in her lap, purring softly. In that quiet moment, Marta understood just how much this small creature had changed her daily rhythm. The emptiness that used to hang over her evenings had been replaced by something far more comforting, a quiet bond built on shared presence and gentle need. As Oliver slept peacefully, Marta felt something deep and lasting settle in her heart. A strong mix of love and responsibility had taken root. It was clear Oliver was settling into his new life just fine. But even more than that, he was becoming part of her. His presence filled her home with small surprises, lightness, and a sense of meaning she hadn't expected. Her days, once predictable, now felt full of quiet joy and purpose. Over the following weeks, Marta started to notice little things about Oliver, things that didn't quite match up with any kitten she'd known before. One morning, while sipping her tea by the window, she watched him carefully tracking the shifting shadows across the floor. But it wasn't playful or clumsy. His movements were sharp, focused, and oddly deliberate. His yellow eyes, so vivid and clear, seemed to notice everything. He'd fixate on the tiniest motions with startling concentration. When a leaf drifted from a tree outside, he didn't just glance. He launched at the window with surprising speed, paws spread, his focus absolute. It left Marta blinking, unsure whether to be impressed or uneasy. Later that afternoon, while she worked in the garden, Oliver sat nearby. His eyes didn't follow the usual garden distractions. Instead, they stayed locked on something far off in the distance. His ears twitched at faint sounds Marta couldn't even hear, his head snapping toward things she hadn't noticed. It was during these quiet, still moments that a small chill crept in. There was something raw in him, something not quite tame. Even his playtime had taken on a different tone. The feather toys and soft balls Marta brought out didn't just entertain him. They seemed to trigger a kind of deep, intense focus. He didn't bat at them lazily. He hunted them. He moved with such speed and grace that Marta found herself mesmerized and just a little unsettled. "You're a fierce little hunter," she murmured one evening, watching him crouch low and strike with almost perfect accuracy. His behavior was still kitten-like in many ways, but there was a sleekness to it, a sense of power that didn't quite fit with his fluffy appearance. Marta found herself both amused and slightly on edge. These odd habits were charming in their own way, but they raised quiet questions in Marta's mind. Was this just a quirky kitten, or was there more to him? Could his unusual instincts and behavior point to something deeper? Something tied to where he came from, or what he truly was? As autumn shifted into winter, the days shortened, and the chill in the air deepened. Inside Marta's home, the fire offered steady warmth, but her thoughts about Oliver grew less settled. Every day brought new behaviors, things that didn't align with any house cat she'd known in all her years. One cold morning, while raking leaves in the garden, she saw him again, watching the birds. But this time, it wasn't with curiosity or playfulness. Oliver crouched low, completely still, his gaze locked on the flock as though preparing to strike. He didn't move, even after they flew off. He just watched, eyes intense, body still humming with tension. Later that day, indoors, Marta tried to interest him in a new toy filled with catnip. To her surprise, he barely reacted. He gave it a sniff, then wandered off, clearly uninterested. But a simple piece of string from her sewing kit that he couldn't get enough of, flipping it, twisting it, and working it in ways that felt almost too clever for a kitten his age. Each of these small, odd moments began stacking up in Marta's mind. None of them meant much on their own, but together they whispered something she couldn't ignore. It wasn't just Oliver's strange eyes, his strong little body, or his quiet nature. It was something else, something deeper, something in him that felt different. That evening, as the fire crackled in the hearth, Marta sat quietly, watching Oliver's shadow dance in the flickering light. His ears twitched at every pop from the logs, his body tense and ready, always alert. In that moment, surrounded by warmth and silence, Marta let herself fully wonder. What if Oliver wasn't just a normal cat? She leaned forward slightly. "Oliver, what are you?" she whispered. He turned to face her, those intense yellow eyes meeting hers with a look that felt almost knowing. The next day, her unease grew stronger. When her neighbor Susan stopped by for tea and caught sight of Oliver, she gasped. "Mar, that's no regular cat. Look at those eyes and how he moves. It's like he can read your thoughts," Marta laughed, brushing off the comment, but the words stayed with her. They matched the quiet thoughts she'd been trying to ignore. It was time to find out more. She picked up the phone and called Dr. Brown. Marta described everything. Oliver's sharp reactions, his strange focus, his unusual lack of interest in typical cat things. There was a long pause. Then Dr. Brown gently suggested she bring Oliver back in for a closer look. The concern in his voice was quiet but clear. The next morning, Marta bundled Oliver into his carrier and returned to the clinic. Dr. Brown welcomed them with his usual kind smile, but there was a curiosity in his eyes. As he examined Oliver, his expression slowly shifted, his brow furrowed, and he grew more serious. "He's remarkable," the vet finally said, brushing a hand over Oliver's coat. "These eyes, this build, I've never seen a cat quite like him." "I think it's worth doing some tests, Doctor," Brown added gently, "just to make sure." "It's possible. He may not be entirely domestic." His words echoed what Marta had feared and wondered all along. As they left, Marta held Oliver a little closer. There was something more to this cat, something that couldn't be explained by behavior alone. The following days felt slow and heavy, each one wrapped in uncertainty. Marta found herself jumping at the sound of the phone, her heart thudding whenever it rang. Every call could bring the answers she was both dreading and longing for. Then one afternoon, the call finally came. Marta picked up with a trembling hand. "Mrs. Thompson," Dr. Brown said, his voice careful. "We got Oliver's test results back." The pause that followed made Marta's breath catch. "What is it, Doctor?" she asked, her eyes flicking toward Oliver, who sat calmly on the windowsill, watching the birds beyond the glass. "It's unusual," he began slowly. "His genetics don't match a typical domestic cat. In fact, they suggest he might not be one at all." A cold wave washed over Marta. She'd known something was off, but hearing it out loud still took the air from her lungs. "Not domestic?" she repeated softly. "Then what?" "We believe Oliver may be part Pallas's cat, Doctor," Brown explained. "They're a wild feline species from Central Asia. Rare, powerful, quite different from your everyday house cat." Marta sat down, her mind struggling to keep up. A wild cat living in her home. It was almost too much to process. "How could that even happen?" she whispered, more to herself than to the vet. "It's rare, but not impossible," Brown replied. "Sometimes young wild animals are mistaken for domesticated ones, especially when they're small." He hesitated, then added, "We'll need to talk more about what this means. Keeping a wild species isn't simple. There are laws and risks." "I understand," Marta said quietly. "Thank you, Doctor. I'll need some time to think." She ended the call and turned toward Oliver. He looked exactly the same, but now she saw him differently. Those sharp features, that steady stillness, it all took on a deeper meaning. As if sensing her thoughts, Oliver leapt down and patted over, rubbing against her legs with the same gentle affection as always. As she stroked Oliver's thick, silvery fur, Marta's thoughts swirled with emotion. What was the right thing to do now? He wasn't just a house pet. He was something wild, living under the illusion of domesticity. The bond they had built was deep and real, but so were the responsibilities tied to what he truly was. Marta knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but whatever happened next, she would choose what was best for Oliver. Over the next few days, Marta spent her time in deep thought. She loved Oliver, but love alone wasn't enough, not if it meant holding him back from the life he was meant to live. She researched Pallas's cats, learning about their natural environment, their instincts, and the challenges they faced in captivity. With every fact she read, it became more clear. Her home, no matter how full of love, was not the place for him. She reached out to wildlife experts and paid a visit to a local rehabilitation center. She asked questions, listened carefully, and took in everything she could about what Oliver would need. The more she learned, the more she understood. He deserved something more than what she could give him. His instincts, his nature, his strength, they all pointed to a life that wasn't hers to shape. Finally, with a heavy heart, Marta scheduled a meeting with Dr. Brown and a representative from the Wildlife Center. Sitting in the vet's familiar office, surrounded by the usual smell of antiseptic and pet shampoo, Marta felt a mix of calm and sorrow. "We've found a facility that specializes in Pallas's cats, Doctor," Brown explained, handing her a brochure. "They're ready to give him what he needs to prepare him for the wild." Marta held the brochure tightly, her eyes scanning the photos without really seeing them. "And what if he can't adjust?" she asked, her voice low but steady. "What if he's been with me too long?" The Wildlife Center representative offered a kind smile. "It takes time, but he's still young. These cats are resilient. We'll do everything we can to help him succeed." The decision weighed heavily, but Marta knew what she had to do. "I want what's best for him," she said at last, her voice catching as tears welled up. "I can't be selfish. He deserves a life that's true to who he is, not limited by my need for company." And so the plan was set. The parting would come quickly, sooner than she was ready for. On the day of the handover, Marta held Oliver close, feeling his warm fur and steady purr one last time. Letting go felt impossible, but she reminded herself this was a gift, the hardest kind of love. As she passed him gently into the care of the Wildlife Center staff, her chest tightened. "Goodbye, my dear Oliver," she whispered. He looked at her with those deep yellow eyes, calm and unafraid, as if understanding everything. She stood on the walkway outside as the car pulled away, tears streaming down her cheeks. The pain was sharp, but beneath it was a quiet sense of peace. Oliver was going to live as he was meant to, wild and free. And she had played a part in helping him find that path, no matter how much it hurt to let him go. The months that followed were quiet, but Marta received regular updates from the Wildlife Center. Each report came with a mix of pride and ache. They told her how Oliver was growing stronger, how his instincts were sharpening, how he was learning to survive on his own. Marta held on to those updates like treasures, imagining the little kitten she once rescued becoming the wild creature he was always meant to be. Then one day came the news she both longed for and feared. Oliver was ready to be released. On the scheduled day, Marta traveled to the Wildlife Reserve, her heart racing. The staff welcomed her and brought her to the large, secure enclosure where Oliver had spent his final weeks. She spotted him immediately, perched on a rock, his fur thick and gleaming, his eyes scanning the land like a true creature of the wild. "He's come a long way," one of the staff said with a warm smile. "You gave him a second chance, Mar." Marta nodded, unable to speak. She just stood, taking in the sight of him. When the enclosure gate opened, revealing the open expanse of grasslands and stone, Oliver paused, his body tense as he sniffed the unfamiliar air. "Go on, Oliver," Marta whispered under her breath, her voice cracking. Slowly, he stepped forward. Then with a sudden leap, he crossed the threshold into the wild. He moved carefully at first, each step measured. Marta's heart swelled with both pride and sorrow. He was no longer hers, but he was finally where he belonged. Then something shifted, movement in the distance. Another Pallas's cat appeared, blending almost perfectly into the rocky terrain. Oliver froze, alert. The two cats stared at each other, their bodies low and cautious. Then, slowly, Oliver moved closer. The other cat didn't retreat. It mirrored his step. In moments, the two slipped away together, vanishing into the tall grass as if they had always belonged there. Tears rolled down Marta's cheeks, but a smile broke through. Oliver was free. He was thriving. Though it hurt, she knew this was how it was always meant to be. He had found his place in the world, and in doing so, he had changed hers. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Marta turned to leave. Her heart was full, not just of grief, but of gratitude. Oliver had taught her how to let go, how to love deeply, and how to respect the wild, beautiful rhythms of nature. He was no longer by her side, but his story would live forever in her heart. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter.